us in this segment is Dr. Steve Pieczenik. It's always an honor to have Dr. Pieczenik, a person of great knowledge and experience. He's a psychiatrist, a former State Department official, clinically acclaimed author of the thrillers by Tom Clancy, Tom Clancy's Op Center and Tom Clancy's Net Force paperback series. He was co-creator of those. He's been trained in psychiatry at Harvard University, in international relations at MIT. His novels are based on over 20 years of experience resolving international crises and hostage situations for the Department of State for 4 administrations. You can find him at stevepieczenik.com, and you can also find him on Twitter at Steve Pieczenik. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Pieczenik. It's always a pleasure, and good luck on your new show. I know you're going to do very well, David. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us today. Oh, you had a great interview yesterday. It was a very energetic interview, we'll put it that way, with Alex Jones about Donald Trump's turn in Afghanistan. Yeah. And many of us, I watched the live tweeting by Ron Paul as he was watching the announcement and saying, this is the neocons in charge again. He says, you should be very scared if Lindsey Graham is this happy about what's going on. And it looks like we're going to be there forever for the minerals or for whatever purpose. When Donald Trump says that we're going to win it, I want to know what winning means. I saw a guy on Fox News this morning, and he had both legs blown off, and that's exactly what he was saying. He said, I want to know what it means to win in Afghanistan. How do we define that? We've never won a war of counterinsurgency. No empire has won that. Our country was born out of defeating people who are trying to occupy us in this country. So I just don't see that happening, especially in Afghanistan. Your comment. You're absolutely correct, David. Number one, let's go back and Ingram, she wrote something on a tweet which is correct, and I should mention this. We had 100,000 American troops in Afghanistan in 2011. On top of that, we had 10,000 British troops. That's 110,000. On top of that, we had 30,000 NATO troops. So let's say about 140,000 to 150,000 troops in 2011, and we did not make a dent into anything, let alone talking about insurgents, because we don't know who the insurgents are. They've been created by the CIA or by some fictitious narrative called the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. It's just ridiculous narratives. The problem here is that there is no military solution. There is no victory. There is no ability to wipe out the enemy, and we're going to kill them. And more importantly, we should leave it. It's 16 years, $6 trillion. What they haven't talked about are the 30% increase in PTSD and in suicides by our military heroes. Now, that's very nice for General Mattis, McMaster's, and Vogel, and all of them who get their pins and stripes during peacetime and then go to the Beltway to make their money because they have no other way to make your money, unlike your show, Alex Jones, you, David, all the young people there, where they go out, they hustle, they try to risk. We don't have that kind of generals. What we have are peacetime generals who are really the maidens, or as I would say, the whores of the military-industrial complex. That cannot continue. And the reason I was livid was simply because I wasn't angry at the generals or as much as at Trump. I was angry at myself. Because for quite a few years, as Alex knew and there are others in the intelligence community knew, I wanted a military presence in the office and around Trump because he had a very erratic behavior. I'm not going into any diagnosis. And the reason for those generals wasn't because they were brilliant generals or they were great strategists. None of them are. But they were there for command and control. And in fact, John Kelly, whom I do not know and I do respect, was head of Southcom. I had worked at Southcom before, so I knew the complexities that were involved in running a civilian military organization. And he, in fact, did clean out most of that
White House. Gorka has to leave. Kellyanne Conway has to leave. Jared Kushner has to leave. Ivanka has to leave. So what I was angry at, and I was reflecting perhaps, and I'm not speaking for millions of other people, I was speaking as a supporter of Trump and someone who went against 9/11 nonsensical narrative that we were attacked by some people in Afghanistan and Iraq, which was nonsense. So Trump was only supposed to do three things, three basic things. Stop the wars, as he said, all over the world that were costing us trillions, decrease our taxes, and increase the budget for infrastructure. None of the three were done. None of the three were done. He got involved in Obamacare. He didn't know what he was doing. The Republicans didn't know what they were doing. The military didn't know what they were doing. The McConnell didn't know what he was doing. Then we get involved in the wars that we know nothing about as generals put in more soldiers that they created the problem in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan. So we've expanded the scenario of wars. And now we're completely on 180 degrees away from Trump. And what I said is Trump cannot continue, and he will not continue. But I will also make another prediction. Pence will not come in as the vice president.
What do you think is going to happen? If you feel that Trump is going to be removed, or what, you think he's going to be impeached or removed or somewhere?
I'm not going to make that prediction. I believe that Trump, without his family, without holding on to Jared Kushner, this Orthodox Jew who have had no experience whatsoever, whose father had to pay $2.5 million to get him into Harvard after he failed in what we call Hader, Orthodox Jew. And I'm a Jew.
And a big loan from George Soros as well.
Well, whatever it is. I mean, this is a totally novitiate who's not very bright, even when he was given everything, an entitled, spoiled brat, along with his daughter. And he's in charge of the Middle East policy, and he goes around to Afghanistan when our boys are dying at a rate that's unbelievable. Plus, I have to deal with young men, young Christian men, coming back to north central Florida who have been sent to Somalia, Sudan, and Djibouti. They do not speak the language. They don't know why they're there. Their own generals, and I've got to give kudos to their own colonels and commanders in Africa who say, what are we doing here? What are we doing in Somalia and Sudan? So once again, we have this military-industrial complex. Trump has no idea of what's going on. I've got problems in Afghanistan with Pakistan. I've got problems with Pakistan and India. I've got problems with India and China. Then I got problems with China and North Korea. Where's the solution?
We don't need rules of engagement if we're fighting a real war. We didn't need those types of rules of engagement when we were fighting the Nazis. We just fought them. The goal was to defeat them. We understood what the goal was. We had a clear definition of what winning meant, and we weren't pulling back any punches. But if you're going to act as a colonial power, and if you're going to occupy somebody, then you've got to have these phony rules of engagement. To me, that seems to be the essence of the problem, that people are talking about, well, whether we should have the rules of engagement or not, or if that's a good thing or not. That shows that we're operating as a colonial power, doesn't it?
Well, basically, the rules of engagement is one smaller element. The real problem is McMaster knows this, Mattis knows this, and I don't think Trump really understands it. Killing people or an occupying power is not a strategy. And it never has been a strategy since World War II. This is not a strategy. In World War II, the strategy that was developed by George C. Marshall against against FDR's opinions was simply to say, okay, we will have to build up our army. In order to build up my army from 110,000 to 10 million in 2 to 3 years, which was formidable, the Russians or the Soviet army took over most of our battle on the Western Front, and we fought in the battle on the Pacific Ocean so that we could relieve over 150,000 Soviet soldiers to approach, again, the Western Front. That was a strategy. The rules of engagement, even in World War II, was very simple. You kill or arrest the Nazis. We have taken an immense amount of prisoners of war, but the Soviets came in 40, 41, and we couldn't come in until 44 and 45. That was the basic strategy. Here, there is no strategy. 9/11 was an inside job. There was no requirement to go to Iraq. There was no requirement to go to Afghanistan. So why do I berate the generals? Because they're conspiratorial. This is collusive. They should know better to eventually stand up and say, no, we were taken advantage of, or we wanted to take advantage of one way or the other. And they should have said, no, no more wars, we're pulling back. And they should have had the guts or the manlyhood or their position to say, no, we're not going to fight a war that makes no sense, and all we're providing is cannon fodder. Those 8,000 young, brave men and women will be cannon fodder. When you go through the hospitals and you see how many people have been injured and damaged, you know what? If the president thinks that's such a great idea, let him send Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump to the front lines, like I've said, every other president. Let the Bushes send their daughters in, the Clintons send in Chelsea. Let Trump really send in Kushner to the front lines so he can have the advantage of understanding what a bullet means going through his shoulder or his legs, and let him have the opportunity that he's afforded to everybody else to blow up and have post-traumatic stress syndrome after an IED blows up. And then Ivanka can sell all of her material she wants on the front lines of wherever the front lines are in Afghanistan, because there are no front lines. I've been to Afghanistan.
You know, Dr. Pieczenik, before you move on, I'm reminded of Kushner at war. Remember when he went out there to meet the troops, and he's dressed up in his preppy suit, and he's got the Kushner thing across. Let's see if you guys can pull up some of those pictures there. And people were trolling him relentlessly on Twitter, and they were calling it Band of Brooks Brothers and all these other things. It was hilarious, but you could see the resentment on the faces of the troops in the background. Like, who is this guy? Why is he here? And I think they're asking the same question about themselves. Why are we here? And the American people, I think, are asking that same question after 16 years. Why are we here? Trump, for 6 years, he was tweeting out, Ron Paul was right. We got to get out. We got to come back. We got to rebuild America. This is a war that we're not going to win. And then all of a sudden, these generals take him to Camp David the day that Bannon leaves. They take him to Camp David. And we hear the next day, General Mattis says, well, coming in, he had a very different idea, but he's changed now. We're going to give him the weekend to think about how he's going to sell this to the American people. It's like, oh, this is going to be really bad. And it was really bad, wasn't it?
It was terrible. Mattis, number one, wants to portray. You see, each one of these generals are really what I call the prima donna that eventually want to get their books and their movies done. Contrary to Mad Dog, whatever his name, he wants to, self-describe. He's not that intellectually strong. I've had to read his articles, but he's always had two co-writers with him because he's not very literate when it comes to writing an article or his presentation. He goes to the Hoover Institute. Then he sits on the boards and he makes $10 to $20 million, although he corrected his Wikipedia to put $5 million. I have never seen anything in his history that shows he has the capacity to create strategy, to begin a war, to implement a war, or to finish a war in the same way that Marshall did. George Marshall, who never wrote anything about himself. And what does Mad Dog Mattis do? He runs to the television show so they can be a show about him. Then he creates the persona that he's Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was a brilliant general, was a brilliant thinker. Mattis is an idiot, is a terrible general, and has no idea what he's talking about. When he was a major, he was recruiting Marines in Oregon. Now, give me a break. All of these generals were peacetime generals. So what's happening? It's
a massive bureaucracy, isn't it? And one of the things that you said yesterday.
That's exactly it, David.
We're about out of time, Dr. Pieczenik, but I wanted to go back to something you said yesterday. We've only got about 30 seconds left. The real ISIS, you said, was created by the CIA. We need to remember that. We can't say that enough. ISIS and Al-Qaeda were creations of the CIA. What are we doing there, fighting them?
Because the military-industrial complex of which he is part of, Clapper, who claims that Trump's not fit, he's a total whore of the system. Clapper had conflicts of interest up and down the line while he was DNI and NGA. He was a neo-special.
All right, we're out of time. Got to cut you off. We got a hard break. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Steve Pieczenik. You can find him at stevepieczenik.com. Thank you so much for joining us.